Starting video transmission. Let me refresh and see if it's showing up on my YouTube channel. Show up on the live. Oh, yep, there it is. Just waiting for us to go live. They can probably hear me in the background talking to you. So I'm going to turn your volume down, Grant, and then I will bring you up in just a moment.
Oh, good.
I got to make sure that I got everything set first. Oh, there it is.
Let's go!
Good evening, everyone. Oh, I'm piping right back into myself like some kind of fool. But anyway, I'll let the starting screen come up here. There we go. So anyway, folks, tonight I am pleased to be joined by Grant Sundberg. He's one of the gentlemen that works within the Missouri Freedom Initiative to make Missouri the freest. The freest? Yeah, it's going to be one of those nights. The freest state in the nation. So, without further ado, let's start the recording, and then we'll go from there. Why is my audio look like it's blowing out? But I guess maybe it's not. I don't know. Can everybody hear me okay out there in YouTube land? I'm guessing you can because nobody said we can't hear anything. I want to make sure everybody can hear me because I'm using a new piece of software this evening, so I want to make sure that you can all hear me out there in YouTube land. So give me give me a 5x5, as they say, and we will get going with the recording. Okay, 5x5 from Voodoo Queen. Let's do this.
In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
All right, folks, and we're back with another edition where freedom lovers unite for discussion, talking, questions and answers, and all the hot topics here in Missouri. And another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. So, before I begin, I would like to remind everybody that our own Catherine Dreyer, one of our fellow freedom fighters, is on the Brian Nieves show. Let's see, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, she said sometimes she gets in there at 2:30, sometimes she gets in there at 3. But it's his show is from 2 to 4 in the afternoons. So she's there Tuesday and Thursday riding shotgun with Brian Nieves. So I just wanted to let you all know that if you have the opportunity, the radio station is 93.3 out of St. Louis, and Catherine is a co-host 2 days a week. And so show Catherine some love and, take a listen in because we all know Catherine. She knows freedom. She knows liberty, and we all know that she wants Missouri to be the freest state in the union. And also, just a reminder, if you didn't get to hear Senator Mike Moon's interview with Sam Britton last week, then please make sure you go to molibertyradio.us. You'll find the link down here in the description on every podcast I do. But go in, look for the archives, and go back and listen to last week's show. Senator Moon stayed on for 2 hours. We had several people call in, ask questions about different topics. It was a good show. It was really a good show. So show some love to Sam as well. Go in. If you didn't listen in last Sunday, check out the archives and with his interview with Mike Moon. And then he is going to have on Mary Elizabeth Coleman on for about a half an hour this Sunday. So again, molibertyradio.us. 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time. Make sure you go check them out, and feel free to call in. Ooh, what am I doing here? Turning up the noise. But make sure you check them out because again, I think you'll really like what you hear. But without further ado, let's bring Grant in. Mr. Sundberg, how are you this evening, sir?
I'm good, John. I'm glad to be here. How are you?
Living the dream, my friend. Living the dream. So, here's the thing, Grant. Everybody here pretty much in the live stream knows who you are. But
For the most part.
we have a lot of listeners at Lake of the Ozarks and in the Owensville area here who don't know who you are. So let's start off with a little background about yourself, and then I wanted of course, there's topics we want to discuss, but then I want to kind of move into how you got involved in politics in general, and then how you got involved with the Missouri Freedom Initiative.
Absolutely.
Are you there? Are you there, Grant?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Yeah. Do you want me?
Yeah,
where
go
do you
ahead.
want me to start?
Just give us a little background information about yourself first, and then we'll move on.
Okay, awesome. Well, I currently live in Boone County, outside Columbia. I have a day job doing carpet cleaning, but otherwise in my free time I spend a lot of time just looking into Missouri politics. Something that I'm very passionate about is making sure Missouri is very free. I think there's a lot of work to be done in the legislature, and I really do pride in being a citizen activist of sorts. I find it really enjoyable getting to meet the people that I have met through the Missouri Freedom Initiative, and especially with you, John, and even Patrick and all the other people I'm not naming right now. But it's been that's kind of a little bit about me. So I didn't know if you have any other questions you want to add to that.
Well, I mean, it's a thing. So I guess if we're going to do this the right way, if I'm going to be a good interviewer, when did you really start getting involved in politics in general? Did you do that at a relatively young age, or were you in your 20s or late teens before you really got interested in politics?
Yeah. I would say my interest in politics is probably within the last 5 or 6 years. But I would say my favorite subject growing up in school was social studies. I really enjoyed learning about history and geography. So I've kind of always had a predilection towards those type of topics. So seeing kind of politics as a more applicable perspective in those areas. I would say about 6 or 7 years ago, I really got into kind of the pro-life movement. I'm a Christian, and so those were things that were that was really important to me and advocating for. But a lot of the stuff that I grew up in going through school was learning about the federal government, how that works, and U.S. reps, and it wasn't till I actually moved to Missouri that I kind of started focusing more on state politics. I had some friends that really questioned me about libertarian ideas, and so I kind of started looking at the libertarian aspect of things, and that really led me down to the idea that we're better off having smaller government, people having individual freedoms, and through that's kind of how I got started connecting the dots of focusing on state government. I can go into more specifics if you have any questions there. So,
well, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people, even when they get into politics, like me, again, I was a big Democrat for several. I shouldn't say big Democrat, but I agreed with the Democrats on their policies. the idea
Yeah.
of like the libertarian principle didn't hit me, and even after Sam and Trish kind of turned me on my head and spun me off in a different direction, the libertarian thing didn't really come around till really years after that. I was so focused on how I'd been lied to, where I was wrong in
Yeah.
government's role in everyday life, that the libertarian thing did again. It was several years later because I was still talking
Yeah.
to just people in general who were more they were small government, or some of them kind of anarchist, but
Yep.
nobody said, "Hey, you ever thought about the Libertarian Party?" That never really. I kind of found them on my own by listening and hearing other things, but didn't really get involved in their platform. Was it the same way for you, or I mean, when you say people were asking you about libertarian things, is it people that you talk to about politics, and then they would ask you about libertarianism, or?
Surprisingly enough, it was actually people that I was in theology groups with when I was on Facebook. I know you've interviewed Casey Pemberton in the past, but he was someone that I was introduced to through a specific Facebook group a few years back. And so when I moved to the mid-Missouri area, that was someone I got connected with really quickly. And at that time, I was already kind of coming across libertarian things, but he and a few other people introduced me to Austin Peterson. And I wasn't, growing up, like, I wasn't unexposed to the libertarian movement. I do remember very clearly the 2012 election, and that was kind of the second Ron Paul movement. I do remember the Ron Paul movement of 2008, but I was very young in 2008. I was 14 years of age, and then 2012 I had just turned 18. So I wasn't like necessarily really paying attention at that point in time. But a lot of propaganda gets put out there, and I know at that time the Libertarian Party was very much pro-choice, but meeting people that were libertarian and pro-life was kind of revelatory to me. And then also seeing Austin, who was running for president in 2016, also have a stance for pro-life and still does. That definitely made me interested in studying it further. And so I kind of had this thing where I was trying to figure out, like, does Christianity and libertarianism mesh? And I came across the Libertarian Christian Institute, and they had a podcast. And so I started listening to that for a little bit. And when I was starting to listen to that, that's how I kind of came across the 10th Amendment Center. And that's how I got involved with, nullification issues. And it kind of just kept progressing from there.
Wow, you've had see, this is what, I guess I'm a nerd, and that's fine. But I like to hear, like, so most of you have heard my story, so I'm not going to go through it again. But I always find people's stories interesting, how they, because a lot of people in the libertarian movement actually come from the Republican side of the aisle, not so much the left side of the aisle. Now, while I agree with the libertarian principles until the party, which I know, like, the state party there's going to be some turnover, and hopefully the Mises caucus can come in and kind of straighten things out. So while I do agree with their platform, I'm not really a Libertarian Party member. But it is fascinating to me to hear, what topic brought somebody around. And sometimes it's literally just that they watch the party that they support say one thing, and the nice thing is they're enough of a free thinker where they go, they're not doing anything they told me they were going to do. They have been lying to me from the get-go, and then suddenly they find themselves looking for something else, and a lot of times they end up going to either the Constitution Party or the Libertarian Party. But yeah, it's nice to hear that somebody kind of, you were kind of a freedom lover, I guess, from the get-go, and then you kind of found, you were guided in a way in just by people that you meet, you know?
I don't know necessarily like if I was a freedom lover, but it was definitely just, having an openness to learn. Because I always kind of like in this trying to figure out like, I mean, and I don't really like labels, but like trying to figure out like where I, fit in the political spectrum of things. I'd probably say I grew up in a pretty moderate household, and so there was different leanings on things in regards to like, fiscal responsibility, but social things it just depended on what it was. My family doesn't really necessarily talk about politics a lot, but it comes up every once in a while, just depending on the issue or the severity of the issue. But like I've grown to kind of appreciate politics, because there's a lot of good change that you can do, just as much as there's a lot of bad change that can happen as a result of it. And being an informed citizen is really important if you're wanting to keep things free for the individual. So.
Yeah, and some of the comments here, like from Tom and Catherine, Tom said he read some stuff by Harry Brown, and then Greatness of Lysander Spooner, and then, of course, Catherine with the Revolution and Manifesto by Ron Paul. Now, I haven't read any of those. My books were Dark Alliance from Gary Webb, The Coors Connection, and some other books like that is kind of that's the things I started reading when I went down my path. And a lot of people, I remember in 2012, I just had a part-time job at the time, but I remember there was a tobacco rep that came in, and he said, he was kind of into economics, and when he heard Ron Paul speak, he instantly was like, oh, I like this guy. I remember the Ron Paul thing, because for once it was so nice to hear somebody get up in front of those crowds, say what needed to be said, and actually get applause from several people. The only time, now when he spoke on 9/11, a lot of people booed him, and then he was at, this is the mind-blowing one, he was at some kind of like Christian or I think it was like a Christian conservative event in South Carolina, I believe. And he brought they were talking about foreign relations. He brought up the golden rule and got a resounding amount of boos. And he stood there like, am I at a Christian conference? What is going on? I'm talking to you about the golden rule and you're booing me. Because, it's a sad thing. I guess that's what disappoints me. I don't want to put all Christians or any religion in and paint everybody, in a box. But growing up in a Baptist church, if you said you were a Democrat, people looked at you like you were insane. And it's like, I think we're supposed to keep the politics out of the church. I mean, I was a young man at the time. But I kind of got the feeling that if you said you were a Democrat, they would look at you like Satan just jumped in the room, and I'm like, easy. I swear I'm not evil, But so I guess so let's get into some topics, because you brought up pro-life, but what are some other issues, Grant, that you're really passionate about? I mean, you and I can agree on abortion, the abortion thing. We don't like it. We hate it. We think it's evil. But what are some other things that you really find yourself putting most or more of your effort into than other things?
I mean, right now, and this kind of goes down the track of like the Missouri Freedom Initiative thing, but I really am for anything that is, nullification, anything that gets the federal government out of Missouri. So, like, and this is just how much of a nerd I am. I have the 10th Amendment Center as my home page on my web browser. So I'm always scrolling through their blog to see like what other states are doing. But even so, because of that, that's how I find out about a lot of the legislation that's going on in Missouri, whether it's in the Senate or the House. And so I find a lot of enjoyment because having done that has changed my perspective on a lot of different aspects of, how the world can be legislated, creating laws and whatnot. I know like you're very passionate about, marijuana, and for me personally, like I'm not a big advocate for it, but I don't necessarily think people should be thrown in jail for smoking it or whatever use they want to use for it. And I think it's like the war on drugs has been a utter failure. And that's an understatement for sure.
Oh yeah.
But like it's things like that really kind of make me tick because I think one of the things with SEPA in particular, I did a lot of research when SEPA was going on, and especially through the Path to Liberty podcast that the 10th Amendment Center puts on, but just the amount of fact that like the federal government literally can't execute the laws they usurp properly. There's only so many ATF agents compared to the populace of the United States, and so there's no way to actually enforce the policies that they're enacting without the partnerships with the states. And so it is the state's responsibility to determine what the United States is doing in regards to usurpation of power, and to course correct if they do take too much power.
Yeah, I do thoroughly enjoy what Michael Bolton does. I mean that man is a whiz, and I thoroughly enjoy him. And then another gentleman too, Robert Brown. Again, I've only had him on a few times, but every time he and I have a conversation on my show, I'm always blown away with the ease that these guys talk about these issues. And they just seem to have all this, and me and my old man brain, I'm like, I can't even remember the time my shoes have time. How are you all remembering all of these things? And I guess that's where the nerdiness comes out in me, because I'm like, not only are they preaching a good message, but man, do they have this stuff down. Now, here's the thing. Yeah. We need more people like those two, because now they're speaking truth and they're basing everything on writings. Now we have the opposite side of that spectrum, where you have the left and some rhinos who know how to regurgitate nonsense, make it sound really good, but if you're smart, you know it's a lie. We need more people founded in truth and actual, based in evidence and fact, to be out there doing the same thing that these loonies are doing, and to garner some support, and to gain ears for the message. But it's nice to know that these people are out there, and they're doing an outstanding job on making what can be a very complicated topic, because you have what the founders intended, what they meant when they did it, and then you get to today, and it's been so muddied through time by changing of the vernacular and changing the way things are taught, that we, it makes it harder for people nowadays to understand it. And you get guys like this to say, wait, well, here it is. Let me lay it out for you. But again, you must have a populace that is willing to educate themselves, which I know you agree. You agree, Grant. With a mass, a large majority of an uneducated populace, it makes what we do, what you do, and the Missouri Freedom Initiative, what all we do, makes our job a lot harder, trying to convince people that we're not out here making this stuff up. We actually mean what we say.
Well, and I can think of a perfect example with that, because I know the last two legislative sessions, and including the one that's going on right now. Like, we've been doing a lot of focus with ballot initiative reform, and back in the fall, I was door knocking for a candidate that was running in my House district, and there were houses that had Amendment 3 in front of it, that like they were in support of Amendment 3. And unfortunately, because the candidate I was representing was Republican and I was representing him, I didn't really bring anything up regarding it. But it just was kind of like, especially watching your videos on Amendment 3 and all the garbage that was in it. It's very, at the basis that, the people think like, oh, well, it's going to legalize weed, but all the ramifications that follow along with it, they don't understand, and they haven't done their own research themselves, and the problems that come along with that too.
Yeah, for sure. That was a disappointing thing to be a. I went to that meeting. And Epen did a really fantastic job covering that topic. I mean, he did a wonderful job, and he knew that ballot language. I mean, he knew everything that was in there, and he even stated that there were some African American paper. There was an African American paper in St. Louis that said, "Don't do this. This is not good. This is not what it seems." But because and I want to get into this because with the ease that we have in Missouri of changing the Constitution or amending it, created what we have now, A3. You just get people in here, pay people to collect signatures, and a lot of them had no idea what they were collecting signatures for. They just knew they were getting paid to collect signatures. And so you had uneducated people collecting signatures and other uneducated people signing it because, again, folks, they were tired of waiting on the legislature. And that was, ballot initiatives are great for doing a workaround when the legislature won't listen to you. But we also can't make it to where big money comes in and does what they do and get things like Amendment 3 passed because 13 counties out of all of them that's 13 counties voted yes, and that screwed the whole state. There's a problem there.
Well, especially when you're talking about the Constitution, because I think one thing right now is that that's not how the U.S. Constitution is amended. And, I think that the Missouri Constitution can be amended way too easily because, people I talked to, and this was something that was pointed out to me from someone else, but like, I can't fit the Missouri Constitution in my pocket. It's a book and it has lots of pages and it's not fun to read. And I'm thankful for people like Tom Marks that does things like that. But it's just like, I can fit the U.S. Constitution in my pocket and that thing's hard to amend. So.
Yeah, it's rather, it's a little disconcerting, but again, when you want to be free, it's not easy work. You want it's constant work, and again, Grant, you've been at this longer than me, so let's talk about your first foray in with. Okay, so I guess let's start here. How did you find out about the Missouri Freedom Initiative, and how did you get involved in that?
Yeah, so I'll go back a little bit with that. So like I was talking about earlier, I was listening to the Libertarian Christian Institute, and I came. This was during COVID, and at the time I was living in Columbia, so it was very difficult. I was working from home because that was what my job at the time was asking me to do. But I did before the job I currently have. I was doing social work, And so I was working from home for about a year. And after I would clock out for the day, a lot of the time I would go on walks around my apartment complex because, just distance and just not having to be around people, because people here in Columbia were definitely more apprehensive about COVID than most. And so as I would walk around, I would listen to podcasts and things like that. And so like one day I was listening to the podcast and they were talking about the 10th Amendment, and they had Mike Mahari on. And I didn't know who Mike Mahari was at that time. I just knew that he was he identified himself with the 10th Amendment Center. And so after listening to that podcast, I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. States taking back their rights that were taken away from the federal government. And so I kind of did some more research into the 10th Amendment Center. At this time, too, was the 2020 election. And I got really just out of sorts with what was going on at the national level. Everyone on Facebook that I was friends with or following were just like, I was never a big fan of Donald Trump. I definitely was not a fan of Joe Biden. And especially with the pro-life stuff, any suggestion that, voting for Joe Biden was a solution because of, Trump derangement syndrome was a non-starter for me. But the moment you suggest that, Joe Biden is not pro-life, automatically thinks that you're going to vote for Donald Trump. And I was learning things about people that I just didn't care about. And so that's when I deactivated my Facebook, which has been more blessings to me than anything else. But during that time, I kind of realized there's nothing really for me to learn when it comes to the federal government. Like, I know how that works. I know it's super corrupt. It's very much watered down by lobbyists and a lot of special interests. A lot of the social programs they implement don't help Americans, and they're not fiscally responsible. And I kind of realized, since that's the case, I didn't really know where to turn in regards to, political discourse. But after a while, I came across the Path to Liberty podcast. It came across my podcast suggestions, and I saw it tied to the 10th Amendment Center, and I started listening to that, and that's when I started learning about nullification. So this was about the time that the election was going on. It's about October of 2020, November 2020. And so doing a lot of digging on the 10th Amendment Center page, I realized that they had templates for legislation, like for nullification legislation. So you could take their templates and modify them and, kind of essentially suggest representatives or senators to carry them. And I know there's a lot of more work to that, but soon after that, the legislative session started in 2021, and I saw SAFA was going through. And so a lot of what I didn't even know about the Missouri Freedom Initiative at that point. I actually didn't get connected with them till after the legislative session that year. But basically, on every occasion, whether it be every other week or if I was diligent enough once a week, I would just call my rep, and it's Missouri rep, and I would call my senator. A lot of the time, I was just leaving voicemail, call me back, and talk to me. But it wasn't like anything abnormal, just making sure that it was just part of my routine. And so after that, that's when I got plugged in with the Missouri Freedom Initiative. I was listening to Path to Liberty live stream one day, and I saw Missouri Freedom Initiative on there, and so I kind of started talking with them, and I found them on Twitter, and that was when I started noticing that they did live streams. I think at the time they were doing like Friday nights or Sunday nights, but that's how I met Patrick and Liberty Revolutionary, and just started kind of slowly building a relationship with them. and that they desire to see a freer Missouri too. And so it's kind of just been it's been a slow go, but like I think a lot of it's just been wanting to learn about how the state of Missouri works. A lot of what I knew about, going down to the Capitol and, talking to reps and senators, I didn't really understand that till back in 2019, because the agency I worked for, we would go down there for one of the legislative days with our clients and talk to reps and senators, and I realized, oh, I can go down to Jeff City and talk with my reps and senators during the session, during any time of the year, really, and talk to them about things that I'm passionate about. And like the stuff that they were advocating for when I went down there with my work, I wasn't really a big fan of, just stuff that doesn't really promote freedom. But at the same time I realized that like, well, even with like, whether it's pro-life stuff or nullification things, that I can call my legislature, I can go down to Jeff City and talk with them. Like, that's what they're there for. They want to talk to the people in their districts. At least most of them do. There's definitely a few that don't, but just taking an interest in your state and local government is really, really important. And I find enjoyment. I have a lot of fun doing it. It's fun getting to take a day off work and go do that stuff. It's hard work, and sometimes it's not. You don't get like the instant reward that you're desiring, and sometimes things go against you too. But I find joy in the fact that like I'm taking responsibility about what I care about, and also being around other people that also care about the same thing as well.
Yeah, it is nice. I mean, again, I've been fortunate to meet a lot of folks. I mean, literally in the last year, not quite a year, I've met so many different people, and now I'm talking to I'm interviewing these reps and senators and stuff, and it's fascinating to me because again, I came into this and the format that I started with was not the format that I'm doing now. Sure, I did some interviews,
Yeah.
but I wasn't thinking, I'm gonna be interviewing all these reps and senators and other people involved in all this. I thought I'll talk about issues that are important in Missouri, where freedom
Yeah.
is infringed on, and that's it. And I didn't plan on this, but it's fascinating because again, I came into this thinking, oh, you can't just walk up to the Capitol and talk to these people. And then to come to find out, you can just walk up to the Capitol. You can go up there and walk in and just talk to these people. And I find it fascinating, and I find it very uplifting too, because you understand that right now you still have a chance to make your state the way it needs to be, and the way that founders intended. You go to D.C., you're not going to do that. You have one. I can think of one guy off the top of my head that you can always depend on. Thomas Massey. The rest of them, they're iffy. Rand Paul can be good at times. The rest of them, you're just like, oh, okay. What is this? But in the state, I mean, how many times do we go to the Capitol and talk to legislators that get behind a lot of things that we're passionate about? So it's really, really nice to be a part of something that where you put in effort and you can actually see results. Now, again, like you said, we don't always get the bills that we want to get through, but there's times that we kill bad legislation, which is just as important, if not more important at times, as keeping the bad stuff at bay. So it's kind of nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's also something that's really important, too, that I don't think people realize. Is like, I know right now, like I'm paying attention to the initiative reform going on, but like we made a huge difference killing HJR 79 last session. And I love the fact that like, you and me and so many other people came that day, and we just went around the Senate talking to senators and just communicating like, hey, like this is a bad bill and it needs to be amended. And a lot of them, without us showing up, weren't aware that there was alternative legislation that would have been a vastly huge improvement to HJR 79. And regardless of the fact that even though it got killed, I thought that was more of a win. The fact that, like you mentioned, like when it comes to Washington, D.C., there's people that they don't really want to hear your voice. They don't necessarily, they might not even know about your existence. But these people in Jeff City, a lot of them do want to hear from you. They do care about what you have to say. They may not agree with you, but I think even though we changed a lot of people's minds that day, especially the fact that we had people from all over the state coming and just sharing with them that like, hey, this is the implications for passing this. Here's some solutions, and kind of presenting it that way kind of helps with educating them to help them do their job better on our behalf as well.
Yeah, it's who would ever thought that you go to the Capitol and you'd actually enjoy yourself? Now, again, sometimes when the task at hand isn't enjoyable, but when you get together with a group of people who have a common goal,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody's there for a power play and nobody's there trying to outdo the other one, we're there for a common goal, and that's freedom.
Yeah.
You really, and it's not only is it enjoyable, but it's educational because you're going to learn something about a certain rep or maybe a process that you were unaware of the last time you went there. So every time you go, you learn a little something new, and it's something to keep with you to educate others, which is probably going to the Capitol is vitally important. Talking to your reps and senators, vitally important. But the knowledge that you have that you can bring home with you and talk to others about, to relay the information, relay how easy this was, or, maybe it was a little hard, I think is maybe just as important or more important is the ability to pass that on.
Oh, yeah. Well, and back in November, I had friends of mine messaging me, hey, like, how should I vote on these ballot initiative questions? And that's just like from talking to them about the things that, I do things in Jeff City. I was very careful in how I communicate with them, how they should vote on it. Cause it wasn't like, you should vote for this and you should vote for that. But like talking to them, knowing first off, hearing them out, what they cared about, but also talking to them about the constitutionality of things as well. Cause I find that way more important, and how people vote. It's like, are you going to vote with the way that the law of the land dictates that's supposed to be or not? And like I got to have some really cool conversations with people that I'm friends with that aren't necessarily super involved in state or local politics too, but it's a way of helping people out that maybe they are interested but just don't have the time, or they just don't have any idea. So
yeah, it's it's fun to watch this group grow. I mean, like with Catherine, Catherine probably didn't expect to kind of become a part of the Missouri Freedom Initiative, but Robert Smith and Catherine Dreyer, I had them on the show. Patrick's had them on the live stream. Now, I know they were both involved because they knew how important it was. But it's been cool to watch more people kind of come in. We got Maya and her husband Doug, and some of these others that have joined in, and it's exciting to see because, and again, that's how we know we're doing something meaningful. Because if we were just like so many groups just talk in an echo chamber, or they depend on one person to do everything, we have several people like Voodoo Queen's the email and fax goddess, and and we have people like
Yep.
you who are constantly monitoring legislation. I know Casey does a lot of that too, Casey Rich, and
Yep.
but people see that that the group is actually had like a major success with SEPA, and now we got gold and silver. We've got sales
Yep.
tax on groceries, maybe parents' choice as far as medical decisions. These are major freedom wins, and yeah, killing bad legislation isn't as sexy, but
Yes.
if you get like if gold and silver, if we push gold and silver through, and the governor signs it, that's another huge win. That lends credibility to an organization that says, "See, this is what we mean by getting involved," and that will, I believe, pull more people to the movement simply because instead of just talking about it and complaining and whining all the time, we're
Yeah.
actually getting something done. We're actually
Well,
getting something done.
Yeah, and it's also too it exposes people to something that maybe they haven't thought about before. But part of the biggest thing to having freedom is also taking responsibility for what was there before and before that. It's kind of like the example of a toddler. A toddler is kind of learning how to do things on their own, and at first when they don't understand what's going on, they get really upset and angry. But once they're able to, do whatever they're learning, then they don't need mom and dad to step in for them anymore. They're able to do it for themselves, and they don't need that support. And that's kind of the same. That's kind of the same thing with like these nullification bills. Is that something was put in place or taken away from us that belonged to us, but it takes responsibility from the people and the individuals that live in that republic or area of governance to take responsibility for what was taken away from them.
Yeah, and again, unfortunately, people needed a wake-up call, and COVID did exactly that. It woke a lot of people up to see, like, oh wow, look at how far they're pushing everything. And unfortunately, that's the kind of push, that's the kind of event that we had to live through to get quite a few people to wake up. Not only get angry, but how many of them literally ran for whether it's, alderman, mayor, state rep, state senator, it did, whatever. A lot of people ended up school boards. People got out and said, okay, I guess if I don't want this to happen again, I actually am going to have to get involved. So as awful as COVID was, as awful as the whole thing was, and as bad as government acted, it sure did get a lot of people out of their seats and moving. But the problem is keeping them engaged and hoping that they continue the job and continue to preach the message and get other people involved. Because, again, there's a problem where some people get involved because one thing happens and they think they got it secure and they just kind of drop the ball. And it's like, no, once you're involved, you really kind of got to stay involved. You got to keep an eye on things. You have to keep working. You can't just say, well, I fixed that, now I'm done. No, this is a lifelong, never-ending battle. We don't live in a perfect world, and you got to keep fighting every day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was pretty awakened just from COVID how important local government is, just on the day-to-day aspect of things, and especially being in Colombia, there's a lot of policies enacted that should not have been enacted. I even found myself going out of Colombia just to do recreational things because I was just tired of being around people that were afraid, and so it's very important, like, so especially at the local level, to meet the people that are representing you. Get to know them, build relationships with them, whether it's at the state or whether you live in a city and it's your alderman or your city council, or even just knowing who's in the city commission or the county commission and who your sheriff is as well. Those are huge elections, and they determine what legislation is going to get passed in your county or city, and also who's going to be executing and running the show as well.
Yeah, because when we talk, especially at the local level, say it's your city or county, you know, a lot of people, and I get it, but a lot of people, in some of these areas want to blame the police for everything. Now, while they should know that they are trampling on someone's natural rights, or something that's been enumerated in the Constitution that they're not supposed to be doing, they should know better. It's hard to get people to understand that the police, for the most part, don't write the laws or the ordinances in those towns.
Yep.
It's their city alderman, it's their mayor, it's their county executives doing these things. And so, unfortunately, the anger gets put in the wrong place at times. And it's like, there's been times on this show that I've told my audience that, listen, you can get as mad at the police as you want for enforcing these, where the finger also needs to be pointed at your local government, because they're the ones who are passing it either for a money grab or because they're control freaks or whatever. And it's like, we have to, that's another part of the problem. We have to get the focus where it needs to be, not, instead of just saying it's government as a blanket thing, it's like, well, is it your local government? It's your state government, it's your county government, and who voted for it, who voted against it, who's right, who's wrong here, and take them to task. When you have a Sam Page in your area, like St. Louis County does, or you have a Kim Gardner like St. Louis County does, and it's like, okay, those people were elected. You've got to do something. I mean, again, I know in St. Louis especially, it's going to be next to impossible to not have a Democrat in office because you're in a big metropolitan area. But we got to stop putting the blame all in one place. And you can't just point at everything at the state, when a lot of times some of these local governments are as corrupt or even more corrupt than what we see at the state level.
Yeah, well, and I think even more so too is it isn't necessarily about voting the bums out as well, and that's hard for a lot of people to understand. It's just because someone holds to this party and those values, voting them out and putting them with the other party with other values, it isn't necessarily going to be the course correction that you think it is, but rather, trying to figure out a way for trying to figure out solutions that do promote liberty when those situations do happen, because that's a very hard thing to navigate, in particular, especially like if you live in places like Kansas City or St. Louis or even here in Columbia or Springfield as well. Like, you're not always going to have people around you that share your values, but it's important that you do make your voice heard in regards to certain policies, even if people find them very unpopular. But that's kind of the important thing. Like, I know there's people in Just City at the Capitol that I've interacted with, and I don't agree with them on certain things, but trying to find out on things that we do agree on and work from that angle is really important too.
Yeah, I mean, we don't. Again, the party over principle thing's got to stop. A and B. Sometimes a Democrat will have legislation that's actually Very good. I mean, it could be that they want to, let's say they want to end qualified immunity. That's something I can get
Yep.
behind. They might want
Yeah.
to, they'll be behind decriminalizing marijuana. Okay, I can get behind that. There are certain topics that I can get behind with them, and I'll be glad to help them out
Yeah.
when they do something that I feel is a good thing for everybody. But again, you could say the same thing about some of the Republicans up there. There's a lot of times that they're pushing legislation. It's like, this clearly goes against your party platform. What are you doing?
Yep.
Why are you doing these things? And so, yeah, we have to
Yeah.
put principle over party, and people have got to
Oh
stop
yeah.
voting because there's an R or a D behind their name. It's like, come on,
Yeah.
you gotta put your thinking cap on a little bit there, and
Well, yeah.
do the right
One
thing.
one of my one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter is Justin Amash. And he was in the Republican Party for a long time, but he's always penned himself as a classical liberal. Has put out when he was in U.S. Congress, he put out a lot of good freedom legislation, especially things like ending qualified immunity. I actually remember when he penned that back in 2020, and I think I called Vicky Hartzler's office at that time. And what was funny was, like, a couple days later, I actually got an email with a letter from her office back, which I was really surprised by. But the letter literally had no substance to it. It was literally just Republican Party jargon, why she was not in support of that. And it was just very impersonable. And that definitely rubbed me the wrong way, for sure. And that was definitely one of the picks at that time where I was like, I think I'm going to be done with the federal government here.
Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, it is rather. I mean, again, I used to, follow right along and be like, yeah, we need this and that. I wasn't thinking at all. I was just going along
Yeah.
because, now, mind you, my dad voted Democrat for for a long time, and some of my other family members on my dad's side were Democrats. My step grandfather was a Democrat, and so, I wasn't thinking. I was letting other people do the thinking for me, and I wasn't using the old noggin. And fortunately for me, it didn't get me in any trouble. But again, I was too dumb and uneducated to know what I was talking about. Okay, for those of you in the KEYK audience, thank you so much for joining me again this week for the Missouri Liberty Report. Next week will be Ethan Thampy, and we'll be talking about all kinds of good legislation. And then the following week will be Sherry from it's Senator Eigels, L.A., and I think you're going to love what you hear from Sherry because she's going to give us a look into what her job as an L.A., all her duties and everything that she has on her plate. So we'll see you next week. All right, continuing on. So, Grant, what's another topic you want to talk about, man? Because I know you got all kinds of things on that brain of yours. You're smarter than me. Let's talk about something else, bro.
Oh man.
I stumped him.
I'm trying to think.
I
man.
stumped him.
Yeah, you did. Well, you put me on the spot.
I stumped the smart guy. Yay! Not really. I didn't stump you.
Been. I've just been, and this is something I've been talking to Patrick too about, but I've just been very surprised how fast some of the legislation we've been advocating for has been moving really fast this year. I mean, gold and silver has already passed the Senate. It's going into the House. And then I know HGR 43 has a committee hearing on Monday in the Senate. It's crazy because last year that was not the case whatsoever. They were just up in arms about redistricting. and a bunch of other things that really had no purpose, which really infuriated me. And I'm wondering what your kind of thoughts are on all that going, how fast everything's been moving this year.
Yeah, when I saw Patrick's video the other day that said, it's moving to the House, I was like, holy smokes. That was quick. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Senator Eigel because he's a good guy. I really like Senator Eigel.
Yep.
I do believe that he is getting a little help because of his exploratory run for governor. I think that's actually helping his cause a little bit. And I don't have anything against that because he's pushing a lot of good legislation. I mean, we got gold and silver. We got he got a bill to end personal property tax, or phase it out, things like that. So he's not up there using it as a, he's not flexing on people and ramming crap down our throats. But I do believe that is helping his cause to get some of this legislation through a little quicker. But hey, I'm fine with gold and silver moving straight on, right on through to the House, and them not mangling it, of course, not trying to mend the crap out of it and ruin the bill. I'm fine with that. It's nice to have someone that fights the way he does. Now, I did see something I wanted to bring up. Somebody posted something on a Facebook page today that Plocker is already looking at a run for lieutenant governor. I think
interesting.
He's. They think that's his next step is to run for lieutenant governor. Which, if we want a rhino for lieutenant governor, we've already got a statist in Kehoe. So is it Kehoe? Yeah, it's Kehoe. Yeah. So we've already got a statist in there. We're going to replace a statist with a statist? I just what? Okay, but yeah, I did see that. But yeah, things are moving quickly now. When it gets to the House, because of the rules change, I don't know if that's going to bog it down. I hope it doesn't. I hope that it gets put through in a timely manner, and maybe that's the first big bill signed into law by the governor this year. That would be great if that's the first big bill that we can get pushed to the governor's desk and he signs off on. I mean, that would be simply outstanding. But it's been something because last year we, of course, with the redistricting, how many months did they waste on that? The fighting.
They were still going on with it after spring break.
Yeah.
They were, and not only that, it went until the first week of May, if I remember, because they were still working on that when they had to get the budget through as well.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting ploy as well because, they passed the largest budget in Missouri state history. And I'm certain that that was also coordinated as well if I put my tinfoil hat on. So.
Well, hey, you don't have to. You know what? Let's face it. I mean, we don't have to put our tinfoil hats on for any of that. It's just, it's the way of government. Now, I saw. I can't find the article again. Somebody posted something. It was an article or something that said the governor already wants to add another 2-point-something billion to the budget. It's like, why? Yeah. Why are you? Again. The fight that we're in is to reduce the amount of money coming from the feds. And we need to alleviate the tax burden on the people, whether it's getting rid of personal property tax, gas tax, sales tax, something. Something's got to go. And yet here we are, we're going to expand or, inflate the budget more. I don't understand the logic in this, except for... again, like you just stated, largest budget in state history. Excuse me. And it's like a contest. Well, and we got it to blah blah blah, and I bet you I can add $2 billion. Like it's not a contest.
No, well, I think something interesting too is like I keep seeing them talk about wanting to do projects like expand I-70. And other things, and then like create expand I-29 from St. Joseph to Cape Girardeau, and like I've traveled all over the state. I've been down to Cape Girardeau. I've been to Springfield and Joplin. I lived in Northwest Missouri for 6 years. I've been all over Kansas City, and I currently live in Midmo, and I know St. Louis decently well too. And it can be hard to get around in the state, but also at the same time, it's like who's going to pay for it? And like I feel like they keep announcing these projects to justify the fact that they want to raise the budget as well. But the thing is, someone has to pay for it. And not only that, like if we're passing legislation to cut taxes and things like that, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to cut spending either. And so, and that's the same problem we have with the federal government right now. It's like they want to do these tax cuts, but they're not cutting spending at all. And so then you get huge deficits, and that's also a problem as well, because that gets put on future generations of the populace.
Yeah, it's not a, giving, again, it must be nice to be government, because when they run out of money, they can just demand more from everybody. I can't, if I'm running a little short one week, I can't just walk to all my neighbor's house and demand that they give me more money so I can spend it. I'll be put in jail for, fraud
well, something a lot of people might not know that, like, are in the Freedom Initiative. I'm from Iowa originally. So like a lot of the bills that, we're advocating for this year in the legislative session are things that like I grew up without. In Iowa, there's no sales tax on groceries. I didn't know that till about, I think I was a senior at Northwest Missouri State, because that's where I did my undergrad. And I was, living off campus and, had to get my own groceries. So I was like, oh, I'm paying sales tax on groceries. That's different. And then when I switched my residency to Missouri, I was surprised I had to get a car inspection. I had to register my car with the county and pay personal property tax. And I was like, what is this? And like people can, count out the justification for it, but in Iowa, people drive operable vehicles, and they don't. I mean, everyone's vehicle breaks down on the highway at some point or another. But like, I never had to worry about that in Iowa. I mean, you had to pay for your tags and all that, but you never had to pay at the end of the month a tax that that first off is very deceiving, because I know from listening to this show and other people that 70% of it stays with the state and 30% of it goes to the county and the school district. So not even all the personal property tax you're paying even goes to where they say it's going, and it's really deceiving. And I do get upset about that, because it's like I grew up in a place where I was not used to that, and it's like it makes absolutely no sense to me, because if it worked there and they didn't have it, then it can definitely work here. So
yeah, and I don't know how many people I've talked to that moved here from another state and went, excuse me, personal property taxes, what is this madness? And now we have friends that live in Minnesota, and they were talking about they were going to tax you by the amount of miles you drove per year on your car. Now, when you get up into Minnesota, they're taxed at a higher rate up there. It's a more liberal state. And, people talk about the roads around here. And yes, some of our roads aren't the best. But I'm telling you, I've been up in Minnesota too, and those roads are a train wreck as well. And they got way more tax revenue coming in than we do. And their roads are still crap.
You just have to cross the Mississippi River to see how bad liberal policies are with budgeting. Illinois roads are a venture in and of themselves.
Yeah, it's like like you need the moon lander to drive around because of all the craters.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're right. Yeah. You're right. I mean, but look, go to St. Louis, and big liberal thing. Look at the crime rate. Look at everything else. And it's so funny because when my wife's grandfather was alive, sometimes I would get drug into political conversations, and we didn't see eye to eye on politics at all. They were
Mm-hmm.
Democrats and all this stuff, and at that time I was much more liberty minded. But they were talking about wanting to build this soccer stadium and all this stuff, and I said,
Yeah.
we talked about it. He's like, well, if they don't, they'll blight the area, and I was like, blight it, and they just kind of looked at me with a shocked manner. I said, listen, you're going to tell people the county's going to the people in the county have to pay for that stadium, okay? And then
Mm-hmm.
I said to add insult to injury, do they get tickets to the game? No, you're still going to charge them to get into the
No.
game.
Yep.
St. Louis, parts of St. Louis are a dumpster fire anyway. So now you just have a little bit bigger blighted dumpster fire over here. But why
Yep.
do we have to, subject people to this? And here's the thing. These liberals in these towns love to talk about helping the poor. But now you want to impose more taxes on them to pay for said
Yeah.
stadium. The poor people can't even afford to attend a stadium that you're going to dump somewhere in their county. But you're for poor people. It defies all logic.
Yeah.
I have one thing that I've told people at work, and sometimes they laugh at me, but they know what I mean. I equate government to, like when you were talking earlier about being a toddler and then learning things on your own and getting on your own 2 feet. I always equate government and people to. I always say to people, remember when you were 8, 9, 10 years old, 11, 12, 13, and your parents would give you chores, or they would ask you to do things, and you're just like, oh, I can't wait to get out on my own so I don't have my
Yeah.
parents telling me what to do. But then you get out on your own, and you seem to be fine with government telling you what you can and can't do and imposing these fees and taxes, and you don't get upset about that.
Yeah.
You got to keep
Yeah.
that. You got to keep that rebellious child mentality you had from your early teen years when you hated when your parents told you to do something in general. Keep that
Yep.
spirit alive, man. Come on.
Definitely the angst for sure.
Right.
I think just there's definitely some factor in just being questionable about the things that are going on around you. I mean, as a Christian, like, you definitely should honor your mother and father, but but also at the same time too is that your mother and father is not the government is not your mom and dad, and so they don't always have your best interests at heart. And the way that the founding fathers wanted America to be set up was that the people were involved in the formation of the government, and that's a very I think that's a principle that's been severely lost for numerous reasons. But like I see almost every day people talking about how like America's a democracy. It's not a democracy. It's a constitutional republic. Does it function like a constitutional republic? No, it absolutely does not anymore. I would love for it to return that way, but I just find it as a total loss right now. But that kind of goes with the things with like what we're doing in the Missouri Freedom Initiative is that Missouri can still be saved. The fact that like House reps have such a smaller populace of representation that they like with constituents that they have to hear from. It makes it possible they can actually get a consensus based on the population of the area they're representing, and that goes for senators too, since senators run by county or counties. Because I know Catherine's still in the chat, and her Senate district's 4 counties. So, but like that's a very like key thing.
Yeah, I don't know. All this stuff is, when you see where you go to other states that might even be more liberal than the state we live in, and they don't have things like personal property taxes and that sort of thing, it makes you go, where are these Republicans coming up with, because let's face it, we've been a Republican majority for years. Where did they, and when it comes time here a few years ago, I was listening to Jamie Allman's show, and the bill that one Eigel's bill to eliminate personal property taxes came up, and Allman put up the list of Republicans that voted it down. He's like, "What are you doing? Why would you not vote to end personal property tax at the rate of inflation?" And again, I think sometimes they do it because they know if they vote yes for it, then if they live in a district that, maybe they're in St. Louis County, but they're still elected as a Republican, they're afraid their constituents are going to get angry because, oh, what about the schools and the roads and the fire departments and police departments and all that? So some of them do it because they feel it's political suicide, and some of them just can't deal with the fact that government is not supposed to charge you rent for being prosperous and owning vehicles and a house and everything. That they feel like they have to discipline you for having a job and being able to afford cars and maybe a boat or side by side or whatever. Or again, I'm going to say this for the 1,000th time: how many reps do we have that are pro farmer but won't alleviate them of the burden of a personal property tax? You can't be pro-farmer and then charge them for every head of livestock to have, all their equipment, their buildings, all that. You can't do that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I think I lost my train of thought. I think one thing that's really important regarding personal property taxes, even property taxes just in general, like these counties make so much money off them, and a lot of them go towards social programs, whether they're in that county. And I even know the state does that for social programs too, and people take things off that. But the hard part is government has taken a role that I think would be better for whether it's churches or nonprofits, organizations that are independent of the government to take on. And when people aren't taxed at the level that they are now, their wallets freed up to be able to support those things that they actually do care about. And then you have things like whether they're police departments or fire departments or ambulance districts. People can, donate the money they want to those things. Where I grew up in Iowa, every year in the 4th of July, there was a fire department outside of Cedar Rapids that, they still do to this day. They do a pancake breakfast on the 4th of July. And a lot of that goes to their budget, their annual budgetary needs and things like that. And I think it's a great way. Like, you're providing people food. You meet your budget needs, for the year. But when I hear about what Gary Ride did, going and testifying for, SB 8, which was the personal property tax thing, and, all these county officials and ambulance district representatives go there on taxpayer dime and time, to go say that we would not be able to afford the things that we need. They're not thinking solutionatory at all. Instead of what they should be thinking about, well, if this was taken away, how can we make up for it moving forward? And you can't always be dependent on the thing that is the source of your income, because things change. And it's better to have whether it's the free market or just charity in itself, figuring out a way, how can we get the things we need to be able to benefit the community and the mission that we're trying to support as well.
Yeah, because it's funny. I mean, those folks got to pay personal property tax too. You would think that when they see when they see their bill, I guarantee you they're not jumping for joy, going, "Oh boy, I get to support." When I pay this, I get a new fire truck. They're not. There's no way they're thinking that. No, I don't. I've never met a person that went, Yeah, I can't wait for the end of December, beginning of January to get that big fat tax bill in the mail. Right after Christmas, mind you, right after I spent all this money on Christmas supporting the
Well,
economy. Now you're going to turn
yeah,
around and stab me in the back and send me another big bill. Like, I just it's hypocritical. Again, like what Gary
yeah,
said, they showed up in their dress blues and all, of
yeah,
course they wanted to look all professional, and that's fine. But at the same point, it's like, hey, dude, you realize, again, here's the deal. None of these people asked the question, how are these other states accomplishing this same thing without a personal property tax? How are they doing it?
exactly.
That they don't
Yep.
ask the question. They just go, don't take it from us. Ask yourself, how are the other states, the other 27 states that don't have it, how are they doing it? You can't tell me they don't have fire trucks. They're doing all horse and buggy, dragging water tanks behind them with a guy pumping it and the other guy holding the hose. They have all
Yeah,
this updated equipment. How are they doing that? But the
yeah,
question's not, they're not asking the question. And I think
yeah,
that if, as people and politicians, that's the question we have to put out there. Have you asked your local, a state like Illinois? I don't believe they have personal property tax. Ask them.
yeah. I have no idea. I have no idea.
I don't think they do, because there are people who lived in Missouri that were driving across the line, buying a car in
Yeah,
Illinois and coming back because they bought it in Illinois. They didn't have to pay personal property tax on it, and
yeah,
until a law changed on that. But why don't police fire departments in this state contact? Because I guarantee you, some of them know somebody in Illinois. How are you getting your funding?
yeah,
It's not that
yep,
hard of a question to ask, but
yeah,
immediately when you start talking about taking a little money away, they 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 become apoplectic. They have seizures right there in their chairs, and it's like, calm down. I didn't kick your dog or kidnap your child.
yeah,
All I said was, we got to figure out something different. Easy,
yeah. I mean,
easy.
it's the same thing with SAFA too, though. Like, um, a lot of legislators I've talked to about that, like just asking, like, do you support SAFA? Are you do you want to keep SAFA? Do you want to change it? If you do want to change it, like, how do you want to change it? A lot of those legislators, they've talked to the sheriffs in their counties, and a lot of sheriffs did not show up to the table when SAFA was being created, and like that's unfortunately their loss. I mean, I'm glad SAFA passed. Don't get me wrong, but like your apathy is the reason that it got passed the way it did, and I'm glad it got passed the way it did, because what they were doing already was unconstitutional. Especially with the joint task force and things like that, and enacting federal gun legislation that's unconstitutional. So, but it's the same exact principle. Is that, like, they weren't asking questions then, they're still not asking questions now, with SB 8 and alternative ways of doing things, and a lot of it I would think it's just due to laziness, and not being responsible to your citizenry, as well.
Yeah, that's the thing that still gets me, is how many police chiefs and sheriffs are up in arms about SAPA. And
Yeah,
then again, I was watching This Week in Missouri Politics, and I believe it was oh God, was it Crab Cakes and
Lincoln Huff.
not Lincoln Huff, God, Senate Pro Tem, uh, Rowden. Sorry, Rowden. He
Caleb Rowden.
Yeah,
Okay.
Caleb Rowden, Plocker, and them were talking about the high rate of crime, and they were going to have to do something. And SAPA got brought up, and I'm like, listen, if these city officials are appointing chiefs of police who don't understand the law, that's not my problem. If you don't,
Yep.
they make it sound like because of this law, they just can't, lock anybody up for committing a gun crime. It's like, yeah, murder, assault, attempted murder, attempted assault are still crimes. And so
They
you
are.
can arrest them and take that firearm because they tried to perpetrate a crime with it. You just can't go
Yes.
willy-nilly taking people's guns. And the
Yeah.
uproar, it is astounding to me that these people act like they don't know this because it's an act. If they're
Yep.
that ignorant of the law, why are they in law enforcement?
Yeah. That's a whole other can of worms, though, too.
Yeah, it is. I know sometimes I'm not, I'm not the brightest crayon in the box, and sometimes I state the obvious, but it does
Yeah.
blow my mind that I keep hearing this rhetoric, and I'm thinking, you don't know any better than this, or are you playing and tugging on people's heartstrings again? Listen, and I want to reach through my screen and say, listen, SEPA is done. You lost. Suck it up, Buttercup. Move along.
Mhm.
You again, like you said, you were eerily silent. I guess they thought there was just no way in heck this thing was going through. The governor signs it in the law, then they're like, huh. It's it's that, and they're angry because they're not getting federal money for helping out.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. They're not
Yeah.
getting their money. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, if you're going to trample all over people's natural rights to get money, again, you shouldn't be in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Go be
Yeah.
go be an
Well,
IRS agent.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of that's another thing too, is like, what does police reform look like? And yeah, that's a whole topic in and of itself, because a lot of what police departments are doing is just to collect revenue, and that infuriates me for a whole number of reasons as well. And it's not even about actually upholding the law, but rather making the city or county money, or even the state when it comes to the highway patrol as well.
Yeah, again, we need police officers need to go back to using the term peace officer, not law enforcement. Again, several years ago, even in Missouri, you could find police cars that said UN accredited on them. Now, I'm sorry, what in God's green earth is United Nations accrediting police departments for? Why are they doing this? That's a horrible idea to let the United Nations accredit your police department, because nothing good is going to come out of that. And also, let's not forget, there have been Supreme Court decisions that said the police don't have to protect you, and they can lie on the stand if necessary. They can lie to prosecute someone. So remind me again, they treat us like we're dumb, but you line up all these things and it's like, sorry, you're in law enforcement. Why? Supreme Court decisions have said you don't have to run in and protect me. You can lie to me. And now you're crying about SEPA. Like, why exactly are you a police officer again?
Yeah, it was interesting. A couple nights ago, I was watching a video, and they were talking about qualified immunity for quite a bit, but then they turned the conversation to the immunity prosecutors get, and I forgot what that's called, but something that's something that should be ended as well, because that would help with when they're charging someone with a crime that they're liable for lying, and also that it puts more standard on them to communicate the burden of truth regarding the case as well, because there's a ton of corrupt prosecutors out there as well. Unfortunately, not a lot of people. And I know, like, you're in a few weeks, you're going to have someone on about jury nullification, but a lot of people aren't educated on jury nullification either. and the rights that they have as a juror. And that's also a very fundamental freedom aspect that people need to know what to do, because if you vote, you can be called for jury duty at any point in time. And I had a week of jury service back in the fall, late summer, but there was no court cases or things like that I was called for. But I was kind of interested to see how that would work. In all honesty, but there was no cases that week. So.
Yeah, when I think about when somebody brings up jury duty, I always think about George Carlin, because George Carlin, in one of his comic stand-up routines, was saying, I can get out of jury. He's like, you can get out of jury duty real easily. Just when you're being interviewed, say, I'll make a perfect juror because I can spot guilty people. Just like that. And they'll just excuse you right away. Like, nope, we don't need that. Or, you can do like what Tom does. Tom Martz takes the Missouri State Constitution and a book on jury nullification in with him, and then he's excused every time. I cannot wait for that interview on April 14th. Because this is something I understand the premise, but I want to get into the meat of this, because when you're talking about freedom, like we do here every week, and like Patrick does on his live stream every week, when we talk about freedom, we talk about a sovereign individual. Well, how much more freedom can you, and how much freedom can you accomplish when you have the sole ability to be 1 out of 12 that says this crime is not okay? It's either unconstitutional. This law is either unconstitutional, or it's morally repugnant, or whatever. And I have the ability to nullify this law all by my lonesome. That is that. Not only is that super awesome, but it's also your moral. It is your responsibility. It is your moral responsibility to stand up for the freedoms of others. So, God forbid they ever pick me for jury duty, and it's a court case on, let's say it's marijuana, and this man was in possession of 2 pounds. Those people, the other 11, are going to be like, oh, well, he's guilty. And I'm going to be like, no. They're going to hate my guts. But, I'm literally going to stand up and like, you're perfectly okay with putting someone in jail for something that's never killed anybody? Are you freaking kidding me right now? I'm not okay with that. How are you okay with that?
I'm not okay with that either. Like, I think that's a huge overcorrection for something that, one, naturally grows, and two, is not harming people except the person that's doing it. If you want to say that as well, so
Yeah, well, what did Darren Chappell say a couple weeks ago? The only thing they're hurting is a bag of Doritos. I was like, the man's got a point. The man has a point.
Well,
that's about the only, or a tub of ice cream.
Okay. Well, a couple of years ago, I worked for a cookie delivery business here in Columbia, and you wouldn't believe how many doors I would open, and just the marijuana smell would come out the door. But they weren't hurting anyone. All they were was just hungry. And and I went to a party while I was at that job. It was like a Christmas party, and people were pulling joints out. I didn't partake because I don't really care for that, but they weren't harming anyone there either. It just smelled bad. That's really it. So but yeah, things like that, I think jury nullification is really important. And even understanding what jury nullification is and how to do it, but also it takes a lot of guts to do it, because like you said, 11 people are going to hate you. Actually, I would even argue 13 or 14 people are going to hate you. The prosecutor's not going to like you. The judge is not going to like you at all. So, and also maintain that fine line of how to communicate yourself and standing up for the defendant's rights, but also your rights as well as a juror. So it's a very like complicated thing. It's simple, but it's also complicated at the same time. It's one of those paradoxical things.
Yeah, because people have to understand that if you're going to if you're going to if you nullify something as a juror, what the message you have to get across is like, listen, I'm doing this because I feel that this is a victimless crime, and I don't agree with throwing in someone in jail for a victimless crime. Also, if it was one of you on the stand for something that was victimless, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not doing it just because it's pot, and I'm a weed snorter. It's because I don't like throwing people in jail for victimless crimes. I don't believe in it. So hopefully none of you have to go through this. But if you do and I'm on the jury, please know that I will do the same thing for you. This is about freedom. It's not about weed or whatever where there's no victim involved. I'm doing this for freedom's sake, not for one person. I'm doing it for everyone. And, maybe hopefully you get through to them. It's hard to say, but you hope that you get through. And, it goes back to that movie, America, Freedom to Fascism, with Aaron Russo, where the gal's talking about the court case where the guy didn't pay state tax and federal tax. And the judge is like, I'm going to show you the law where he has to. And the law says, if you must pay federal income tax, then you must pay state income tax. But they couldn't show the law stating that you had to pay a federal income tax. So this gal says, yeah, I'm voting not guilty. And people were like, you mean he's going to get away with it? And she's like, he's not getting away with anything. He didn't break a law. And the judge was really, really upset because he thought he set everything in stone. And they're but she, I know she's done several interviews on the topic. I think my friend Sam and Trish might have had her on at one point to talk about this. But yeah, that thing right there was huge for that guy because he was looking probably at several years in prison for a law that doesn't exist. And so therefore, if it doesn't exist, how can you break said law? And that's the kind of thing jury nullification can fix.
Yep, for sure.
So, all right, Grant. Well, I really, really appreciate you coming on with me tonight. I've enjoyed our conversation. I enjoy it when we get to see each other at the Capitol. Any parting statements for the audience?
Yeah, I would just say in regards to just getting active in government, especially like for me, the Missouri state government is something I really like with the legislature. I like getting active in. It doesn't necessarily even have to be legislation that the Missouri Freedom Initiative is advocating for. It's something that's fun for me is I like to look up bills that maybe I'm interested in and I'll do on my own time. But when it comes to just being active in government, like you can make it fun. It doesn't have to be boring or a drag. Find something that you're passionate about. Call your rep, call your senator, make them aware of it. If it's in committee, call the people in the committee, ask them what their thoughts are on it, or that you would like them to vote it through. Just those things can go a long way. And honestly, at the state level, it takes just a few phone calls for people to be put on notice with how certain things are. Just to repeat, make it fun for yourself. And if you find something, someone else might be interested in that, make them aware of it too. So.
Absolutely. Well, Grant, again, great to have you on. Again, probably, I don't know, maybe May. I want to have a few people on from the organization and just have like a kind of a little roundtable discussion on the legislature and just things that are important to the group as a whole, and more so that it's important for all the people in the state. But again, thanks for joining me tonight, brother. Great talking to you, and have a great weekend, man.
Yeah, thank you for everything, and this was a lot of fun, and definitely look forward to hopefully doing this again in the future.
All right, well, you take care, man, and have a great weekend, okay?
All right, thanks, John.
Goodbye.
Bye.
All right, folks, that was Grant Sundberg, or as he's known in YouTube and Twitter, Goatfoot Grant. If you're on Twitter, follow Grant. Just look for Goatfoot Grant on Twitter. And Grant's a great guy. Grant's one of those guys you just never see him get mad. Grant's one of those guys that I like being around because he's so laid back and he's so relaxed all the time. I mean, I'm sure he gets fired up on the inside, but he doesn't show it. He's just a cool, calm, collected individual, and I get angry at sometimes. Oh, at Goatfoot21. So at Goatfoot21 if you're on Twitter, because Grant will post some things about the legislature as well as Patrick Holland, some of the others. But yeah, Grant's one of those guys that's just a cool, how did they say it on the Cheech and Chong album? Cooler than a cucumber. So that's Grant. He's cooler than a cucumber, or as they used to say on ESPN, cooler than the other side of the pillow. But anyway, folks, again, just as a reminder, Tuesdays and Thursdays, especially around 3 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon, make sure Brian Nieves has a show, 93.3 FM out of St. Louis. Catherine Dreyer joins him twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Also, if you didn't catch Mike Moon's interview last Sunday with Sam Britton, Off the Cuff Radio, please check out molibertyradio.us. Again, the link to their site can be found in the description of every YouTube video that I do. Also, don't forget, Saturday nights at 7:30 p.m. on Odyssey, check out the Missouri Freedom Initiative's channel when they do their live stream to talk about the current situation in the Missouri legislature. And again, this coming Sunday, Sam will have Mary Elizabeth Coleman on for about the first half hour of the show to talk about her bill, sales tax on groceries. So, again, first half hour, then he's going to open up the phones because it's going to be all about Missouri again. Sam's showing some love, which Sam's always been a fighter for freedom, and he's talked about state issues and he talks about federal issues. But Sam's really getting in on the program too here, and well, not here, but in his own way, he's going to have some great guests and great topics. And Sam and I, although we bounce things off each other all the time, Sam's going to think about things that I don't, questions to ask that I wouldn't necessarily think to ask. So, yeah, make sure you show Sam and Trish Britton some love. MO Liberty Radio, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock p.m. Central Time, molibertyradio.us, Off the Cuff Radio. Well, with that, folks, that's going to do it for this edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Again, next week, really looking forward to having Ethan Thampy back on with me again. I believe this will be the third time I've had him on. And then let's see, what's today again? The 24th will be Sherry, Bill Eigels, L.A., and that is going to be another great interview. I guarantee it, because Sherry is just salt of the earth. She is such a great individual, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So with that, I bid you adieu, and we'll see you all next week right here on the Missouri Liberty Report.
Want more freedom? It starts with you. Join us next week on the Missouri Liberty Report and find out how you can get involved to take back your state.
All right, Catherine, if you still here, I hope you haven't logged off yet. If you decide to go the podcast route and you decide to do that, please let me know, because I can bring you on just for 10, 15 minutes, where you can kind of let everybody know the name and, maybe some topics that you're going to be discussing or whatever you're going to do with your podcast. If you decide to do it, let me know, and I'll give you a slot here so we can let everybody know about it and get you some traffic and, we can show you some love as far as listenership, because I think that would be really supremely awesome. But anyway, so thanks to Wilderness Gal, Catherine Dreyer, Voodoo Queen, Grant, Gary Ride, John Doe. Let's see, I saw somebody else in here. Where is he at? Dan. Dan was in. Tom Martz. Thanks to all of you again for joining me this week. Really appreciate you coming on and joining with me for this live stream. I can't thank you all enough for your support and your super nice comments. It makes my job easier. And again, I'm lined up all the way to the middle of April with interviews, so it's going to be fantastico. With that, have a great weekend, everybody. Let's continue to work and make Missouri the freest state in the union. I appreciate and love each and every one of you. And we'll see you all next Friday at 6:30 with Eep and Thampy here on the Missouri Liberty.